Hello, welcome everyone to this meeting with the Audit Members and Committee of the Circuit Council being held in the Council Chamber on the 29th of September 2022. We're also going live with this meeting on our YouTube channel. Item number 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Will.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Norman, Councillor Wilcox, and Councillor Corbett Hall.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest?
Chair, I have not received any declarations of interest.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 21st of July 2022. Does anybody have any comments, disagreements, etc. of what is written down in the formal minutes?
Move it, Chair.
Thank you. No, there's a green roll sign those later. Item 4. The leadership team response was raised at the previous meeting. This item was presented by Andrew Thomas. I'm very pleased to say we have our Chief Executive of the Council, Simon Fletcher, here, who will have to pioneer the Anthony. We've got one by one on the back.
Thank you, Chair. So at the last meeting, I took note of 6 questions that the committee asked. 3 around Treasury Management Report, 2 around the Internal Audit Progress Report, 1 around the Management Report. I took those questions and saw responses from the relevant officers within the council. Those responses were formulated together into the report and was reviewed and agreed at leadership team before we provided it to the committee. The only other thing I probably would say is that the committee also requested that the council briefly set the attendance of the chief executive at the next meeting to answer any subsequent questions on the issues raised and anything else within the committee remit. So I wasn't really going to say any more on that, to be honest.
Thank you, Anthony. I will go through each one. The first one is the from the Treasury Management Report, and then we go to the very office to the further. Are we happy with what I did? Thank you. The second item from Council Robinson was actually delaying capital spend. Are you happy with that? Right. Thank you. And also, Council Robinson, we found on the first road extension plan. Is that? Thank you. Next item was the Internal Audit Progress Report. Yes, Councillor Grange.
I guess seeing as we've got the luxury of having the CEO here, I think I'd be interested to get his views on the internal audit progress, because we were concerned that things were slipping back. And obviously from our perspective of the committee, having that reassurance that there is some resources going on. So having some reassurance that there's resources going into that audit process and progress is being made would be useful.
Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for inviting me to this evening's meeting. I share the concern of those about progress we're making in some of our internal, in particular some of the priority recommendations. And we all agree that we talk about the progress of our point. We review our risk register and are now starting to look at some of those priorities and all the outcomes on a monthly basis as a management team as well as a leadership team, and we will continue to do that. I hope that our internal auditor believes that we take that seriously. We don't take a passing look at the report, we go line by line through the report and with each of the recommendations as well. And as I say, I'm continually grateful that this committee really takes that report seriously as well. We are struggling to recruit to some of our key posts. You may well know this as well, thanks to the legal background. Today, at the leadership team, or yesterday, sorry, leadership team, we talked about some of the key posts and what more we can do with them. Being totally open and transparent part of the process and being, I suppose, deliberate in that we started this year with some financial pressure. We have taken a strategic decision, an operational decision to a whole thing and some posts for a period of time. That's been 3 months for the period of the year to date. At leadership team yesterday, we recognised that we're making good progress with the savings that are required. We do not need to sit on posts or hold recruitment posts for the 3-month period. So we reduced that to 1 month. By the same token, Anthony and myself talked about actually these posts are absolutely critical to fill. So today literally today I've gone to what but today I'm appointed to the talent acquisition role that we talked about as a council for some months now. And again, that individual will be a very good instruction and the local board roles that we look at are these audit roles and some of the finance roles that sitting in Anthony's business as well. So I can't come to you tonight and say we sorted it, we've got those roles filled. Here we do have some improved support in place as is arranged. They are giving you my assurance. They are very high priorities in terms of doing things.
Thanks, Councillor White.
Thank you. It follows on from Councillor Grange's point. The scheme delegation and the financial arrangements for the council assume that the establishment table, that is the number of people we have in post, is as it is. But given the fact that the scheme delegation and financial management regulations are now exposed by the fact that the establishment table isn't unified, do you envisage the requirement to change any of your delegations to your senior officers? So, for example, you might have a scheme where people can get an exemption for the usual oversight of making a financial decision because there's a real vision to do something, but that can get you lose control of that quite quickly. And with internal auditing not really stuff, you might not be able to observe that we've lost quite a significant sum of money. So we may not be recognised through the worst of the money.
Yes, I'm watching the section 151 space as I ask this question. No. We are a small organisation, which is a benefit, I suppose, in time like that, but we do have some key posts taken. This week, I trained for and become the campaign license holder for the organisation because some of us having to, roll up our sleeves and pick jobs that otherwise we wouldn't normally. But when it comes to relaxing the scheme delegation, I'm not in favour of that. I think that controls are really important to us as an organisation and the quality in space. And I also think because of the size of the organisation, the fact that there are others in the organisation who can make the decision swiftly as appropriate, and myself included Anthony, the number one with exciting consultation with Anthony. I don't think we need to start to consider pushing down some of those delegations at this point. What I'd like to do is to fill the posts that are vacant. That's the priority. So give you confidence.
So, Councillor Donkey.
So just it's not just the internal audit team that are part of the control environment. They look to see that they're control working in particularly in the area you mentioned. We've got a relatively new form staff here in the responsibility in the procurement strategy and contract procedure rules to enforce the way the process through the arrangement. Ultimately, delegations will go through, so that's inside the interests to get the post filled because we ultimately the delegations go through.
Yes, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. And just to raise this kind of obviously, I know to say that we've got that capacity to support that delivery. And one of the things that I was concerned about, I think last year, we pushed a couple of lines from last year to the planning to this year because of these issues. I'd be really concerned if we were going to be pushing items into next year again because those are giving an additional manufacturer. And do we envisage that like this capacity going to be enough because there's support in the delivery of the program and actually making sure it gets there. I don't want to people up now delivering to across the line. Do we think that's going to be sufficient? Do we think we're going to be in a decision where we're going to the next?
Andrew, yes.
Thank you. Yes, I envisage that we will be completing that at least the minimum life cycle plan, keeping obviously in account with obviously maintaining what we check in terms of staff, etc. From that side, from that side, to maintain quality, to make sure that we're not missing anything or not just a course. I think the other side of it is that we have now got that capacity with BDO providing the resource in they're providing us effectively with 90 audit days currently. We can obviously have a look at that and have a look at the plan and then draw down any further days that we potentially can from BDO in respect of that. Like I say, I am anticipating that we are going to complete 90% of the plan. I can't hand the heart say that there won't be an audit that rolls forward into next year, but I'm more confident that we'll be closer to the closure of those audits or that audit within the start of April, rather than as happened this year, that a number of those audits dragged through from April to May and then didn't actually get finalised into June. So that obviously had an effect with the audit plan right at the start as reported in July. But current reviewing capacity that we've got, currently reviewing BDO, and they're currently going through doing the scoping and audit briefing for their audits currently, and they started last week in relation to that, and then cascading that forward for their audits. So I'm envisaging that we're going to be a lot better off in the next couple of months. Looking generally, obviously the quarter end finishes tomorrow, the September, and I think last year I came to audit and standard committee. I think at that point I reported about 60% of the audit plan was complete. We're looking currently at about 22 to 25%, so we're more in advance of where we were last year. But one of the other things that I will be doing as part of my reporting progress report, for example, is reporting against profile. So obviously we have the profile of the plan from quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I'll be reporting to the committee of where we are against that profile, so that we've got a full picture of where we are with the audit plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just comment? I don't think probably need all three of you to come back. I am aware from discussions with both Anthony Thomas and Andy Wood that this is a problem across the local authority network. There is a shortage of qualified quality accountants, and we've got a vacancy in the main as well as the senior internal auditor. Do you think, depending on how clear your crystal balls are, is this a temporary phenomenon? Is it going to fight itself if we're going to go through a recession, or do we maybe need to rethink the grading and the value of the jobs if that's what's needed to attract the right person?
Hard question, because the lots of been an exception from the sector recruitment perspective, because historically, traditionally, people have moved out of the private sector to the recruitment sector for the period of reception there. We gained a number of years ago in the last recession, which were very good quality people, but as soon as the economy was back, we moved back out. There is probably a general aging of the local government workforce, which is starting to come to a point where people are either retiring naturally, retiring early because of the negative local government, or they're taking an opportunity to look at their work-life and lifestyle balance after COVID. There's a lot of people that have taken that decision. If you add to that into the mix that the ability to agile work, so you don't need to live locally anymore, opens up a vast array of opportunities for people. It's a difficult mix to have. And I mean, in reality, the only way you can solve that conundrum is you've got to train and develop more people willing to come through. And that just takes time, unfortunately. We're in a position now where events are moving so rapidly that we're unlikely to train those people in that time. So I mean, the only option available then is that we have to look at the salary of people when they're working. We have attracted people previously to be part-time flexible working. I working recently that we are increasingly losing people to the bigger authorities that pay more and there's less responsibility. And there seems to be a trend of people, it's not just literally across sectors that and can get an adequate amount of money for a level of responsibility they're comfortable with their work-life balance. And so my perspective, the only way to solve this is we're going to have to try and develop more people.
Thank you. Yes, Chief.
Thank you, Chair. So I absolutely agree with everything that Anthony just said. So then clearly, it's fairly challenging in terms of the availability of qualified people for building trials. I think part of the issue from my perspective is how we go about trying to attract talent to the organisation. Again, not the only local authority I can experience the same pressure. We are incredibly traditional in the way that we try to recruit. We think that big advert and waiting to see if any receive the advert, exactly by the advert, uses to submit themselves to the process, which is itself very difficult is the right way to go. My personal perspective, and obviously I think perspective like many around the table from the private sector, is that we're looking for talent to go out and get the talent rather than hoping the talent will come to us. So talent acquisition is a very good way of doing that, and that's about somebody that you be recruiting and as a recruiting manager or when the recruiting manager sitting down with our talent acquisition team saying, I need X number of qualified people who understand what the role is, understand what they are, and I think the role. And so we're rather than waiting for them to see it to say and try to be done work to try and see those people. And Anthony has said in his response, we don't need to look at the industry necessarily to do work, we don't need to look at the council. I do work in national working, etc. Much broader and there's lots of calls to us, and we need to be going out. So that's what our acquisition will do. There are other things that we can do, like golden and Jason and more actively. But I think given how much we have trouble building role, we need to be much more flexible in our license to what we do affect our people.
Thank you. Did you want to add to that?
I was just going to obviously put your Anthony and Simon in the stats of the responses. Oh, sorry. I was just going to agree with Simon and Anthony in relation to that. I think one of the things that I found recently, probably over the last 2 years, is that of recruiting and filling posts. I don't think it's just specifically with the public sector. I think it's also on the private sector side as well, in relation to getting audit professionals into the organisation. I echo Anthony's comments in relation to training, but then I would then come back on the other side of that is then you've got to put the time in to train and then develop them going forward. And I think where I've done that in the past, what I found is that we've trained somebody, they become qualified, and then, as Anthony said, they've then moved on elsewhere, which again is a difficulty that we need to obviously manage.
Thank you. We've given that a really good airing. Has anybody else got any questions, comments, or otherwise to that particular item of our staff side? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which was the some concerns about the debtors suspense account. I think that might be you, Anthony.
I know it was a question.
I know it was a question Councillor Grange raised, so. Yeah, I'll give you the 47p myself, Anthony. Thank you for the answer. Yeah.
Any other questions on that? The next item
Is the risk management update. I would suspect, I think a lot of members, is this where you would like to come in, Simon?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very loud, isn't it? Yes, thank you. We, as I said to my earlier answer as well, this is a document that Andrew brings to leadership team on a monthly basis, and we go line by line through it. We don't take a cursory look, as I say, we go line by line. My assessment is, and actually what he's recently started to introduce to that is some of the outstanding internal audit recommendations and progress of delivery against them. So as a leadership team, we will be seeing that more frequently. My intent over the next quarter or so is to introduce what I call star chambers, which is where managers across the organization come to me and or other members of the leadership team to talk about performance and clearly progress against some of these significant risks and internal audit recommendations are part of the conversation we want to have with people. My sense is that we've got a robust system now as a leadership team to continue to review these. But members of the committee will note that some of the strategic risks are not moving very much. And I guess my frustration, and I'm sure it's your frustration as well, is the degree to which we can move some of them on. So those that are within our power, I suppose, to do something about, I would like to think that we are very serious about trying to do something about. But there are some external ones, some of the financial stuff, which obviously we've got very little ability to influence, I suppose. I'm not sure if that answers the questions or I rambled a little bit there, but I'm trying to give you confidence that as a leadership team, we take this very seriously on a monthly basis.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Simon. Clearly going line by line through the docs will allow the leadership team to review what's there. But I think we all know it's the risks that you hadn't foreseen that suddenly land that could knock you sideways. So can I get your oversight on, I mean, let's use the last week as a great example. We know stuff has happened that wasn't necessarily identified as a risk, but can have a significant impact. So what's the process for those live risks, if you like, that aren't captured on the document? How are they dealt with?
Yeah, so I mean, we as a leadership team, like I say, Andrew comes on a monthly basis. We talk about those existing strategic risks. We talk about the degree to which they encapsulate everything that is going on both internally and externally. Where that is not the case, we add to the strategic risks. So again, I'd like to think that not only do we look at the overall risk, we also look at some of the mitigating factors and the degree to whether or not they are responding sufficiently and whether or not we could do more in that area. But we're not adverse to, it's easy to put another risk on the plan, I suppose, isn't it? So in terms of the internal mechanisms we've got to have an overview of what is going on, I'm comfortable with. I guess my frustration is what we can do about it.
Yeah.
So, yes, Councillor Thomas. Sorry, Anthony Thomas.
So I was just going to add, we also have a horizon scanning section on there. So we are looking forward as well as at the risks that are all being presented. So how we would have foreseen what happened last week, I'm not quite sure, but I definitely know we've got the inflationary impact. We've got things like disabled facilities grant delivery, elections. There is a series of horizon scanning which perhaps haven't reached the stage of a strategic risk, but they're being watched on a monthly basis.
Thank you. Are there any more? Yes, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for bringing this document forward, because I think it was something that we spoke about the last meeting. I think particularly in terms of those amber and medium risks, that they were all very, very, very close to the end of tipping themselves into that red high area. And I wouldn't want to be in a situation where we, like some of the comparator authorities here, where we've got 50% of our risks that are way that far out of appetite. I think my concern, because I mean, after this week, I can't think that any authority is going to be downgrading their finance risk anytime. And that does appear to be the one that kind of knits through them all. I think it's just my concern is that there is a lot of risk on that register. And whilst some of them are kind of almost within tolerance, they're very close to being right on the edge. And I think that for me is one of my concerns, was just the overall level of risk. And even if it's just a case of we can bring 2 or 3 of them just back down, that would understand. I mean, obviously you want them all in the green. But that for me, I think is something that I'd really hope to see in the next update to this, because it is that total overall, although we've only got one which is that far out of appetite, I'd want to see the whole body, even if it's only through moving a couple of the lines. So just record that, I think.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think that's an absolutely a fair point. And again, I've been with the council now for the last 12 months. As I think you've noted, Councillor, there are fewer reds now than there were when I started at the council. But it is very much like a yo-yo. As I say, we put in the mitigation, we see the number come down. Andrew comes back the next month. He's the most unpopular person in that leadership team, to be honest, because he comes back the next month and some of them are shot back up again. But I don't mean to make, I'm joking, of course, but I don't mean to make light, but there is very much a we try this, it comes back down, something else happens, it goes back up type thing. So I guess what I can guarantee to this committee is that we will remain vigilant over the strategic risks. And I think as I sit here tonight, that's probably about as much as I can promise you, but I'm making that promise.
Councillor White.
Thank you. I just wanted to emphasise the reason why I believe this committee labours this point, not sort of to the nth degree, but this is the only place where there is democratic oversight of the risk register. And I'm conscious after nearly 20 years in local government that where things go wrong, the electorate tends to say, how did they not spot this? And I think that's the reason why we want to be given the assurance, not only that you're all over it, but also collectively as a group, which is this committee itself, we are actually thinking to ourselves, what is emerging? What are the scenarios that we can foresee? Who would have foreseen, for example, a pandemic that wasn't flu? And all the mitigations we had in place for that were anticipating that there'd be vaccines in place to shut schools, etc., etc. So I think I just wanted to make that point, Mr. Chairman, that's the reason why we do tend to go into this in some detail and might be perceived as a little pernickety on occasions, but I think there's good reason for that.
Yes, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'd just like to come back by saying I take the point very, very warmly, and I promise you, I don't think you're being pernickety at all. Actually, sometimes as a leadership team, I mean, from my perspective, as I'm sure you all know as well, I come in and I've got a million fires burning all over the organisation. Sometimes, well, actually, every time you raise this with me, and you have done on a number of occasions, I've had a number of letters from you as chair, and that's been incredibly helpful because actually that's dragged me back to where the focus needs to be, and at times it needs to be on this report and what's going on in terms of strategic risk. So I welcome your interventions, your comments, your concerns being raised with me. So thank you.
Are there any other thoughts, comments, etc. on this long item? Can I just say, I believe this is one of the most, if not the most important committee of this council. At its heart is good governance. And nothing works if you haven't got good governance. You can't have good governance unless we've got the feeling within this committee of the support of the chief executive. And we've proved in the last 12 months, Simon, that we have. That makes us feel better, and I hope to see you at future meetings as and when. But thank you for all your work so far with the leadership team.
We mean it in that, Chair.
The next item on the agenda is the RIPA reports, policy and monitoring. Senior Officer.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to mention, we're accompanied today by Laura, who wearing another hat is our RIPA coordinating officer. Just a bit of context. The Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act provides the legal basis for surveillance and a structured approach to surveillance to ensure that it's only used for legitimate aims within Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And in line with the Act, we've adopted a code of practice that's attached to the report. The code of practice requires that we produce an annual report to demonstrate compliance with the code when carrying out directed surveillance or or covert human intelligence sources. And the report this evening is really just to confirm that for the 2021-2022 reporting period, we haven't in fact undertaken any directed surveillance or used covert human intelligence sources. And also confirm that the RIPA coordinator and authorising officers for the period have received full training, and that we keep the policy under review. And there are just a couple of minor changes this year to increase resilience and to account for the fact that some posts have changed. The one area I would highlight is social media, since there's a potential for some types of activity to fall within the RIPA code, and we're going to make sure that this is an area built into and highlighted in any ongoing training. So essentially, it's a report to report. There's not much to report. However, it is important that members. However, it's important that members are aware of any activity, whether or not it's happening, and are also kept up to date with the code of practice.
Thank you for that report, Mark. Any comments, thoughts, queries, etc.? Yes, Councillor White.
You say there hasn't been any. Are there any authorisations that haven't been, that are sitting on the shelf waiting to go with an appropriate nod?
Coordinating officers confirmed, yes, we're on, there's no queue, and there were non-authorised queue.
Can I, sorry, Councillor Cross, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting that you're suggesting there's not going to, there's no planned for next year. There's been none in the previous year. Firstly, can I ask why is that? And secondly, the reason being is that as a magistrate who did 10 years in Coventry and Warwickshire, had countless occasions of offences involving benefit fraud, etc. And in 5 years in Staffordshire, I've not had a single one. And I've spoken to my colleagues as well, and they're not aware of any. I just wondered if there's a resource issue or it's just a policy and they're not looking to pursue. Thank you.
I think the threshold is very high for us to actually do this. First of all, we've got to have exhausted other means. Secondly, it's because it's got to be there's a certain threshold of criminal behaviour in which you would need to apply. I think it's 6 months imprisonment term if you've got to be suspecting somebody is offending at that level, or that there's a level of public disorder. I just don't think we have come close to that threshold, certainly during the past 12 months.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just,
Anthony.
just going back to that. Sorry.
On the specific point Councillor Cox raised, benefit fraud investigation is now the responsibility of DWP. So the majority of what you may have seen previously in Coventry and Warwickshire would be investigated and prosecuted through DWP rather than the council. So whilst we may have done that previously when we had our own fraud investigators, we no longer have that responsibility. So we do have some fraud responsibility, but it's not the area you're talking about there.
Yes, Councillor Hurd.
Thank you, Chair. Just on Anthony's comments, what kind of activity would we be investigating in terms of this report?
I'm just trying to think, if you talk about traditional fraud that the council covers, it would be things like single person discount and maybe things like local council tax support. But I'm not sure whether we would do that through any sort of directed surveillance. It's more likely to be through, we detect it through normal processes. We get a form of notification from somebody that it's happening, or we do periodic fraud exercises, things like data matching that the National Fraud Initiative would do. So they may be checking things like how many mobile phone bills are registered at a property versus is somebody getting a single person discount. Those type of activities aren't prosecuted through any form of directed surveillance.
There's also the case sometimes, for example, with tipping or something like that, because there are actual notices. It's not covert surveillance, whereas if there weren't notices, it would be covert surveillance. So where there are known spots where illegal waste disposal is taking place, the very fact there's a notice in place doesn't mean it no longer falls under RIPA.
Yes, Councillor White.
Every year, the authorities ask to write off a certain amount of uncollected business rates. And do you sort of run it through the filter of, well, they could have been operating out of here and we could have used our powers to check before we actually write it off? Because sometimes those numbers are quite significant. The amount of money involved is quite significant. Or is it that that's just a dead end for you?
that would be something I'd have to consult with the benefits section on as to, because they make the application to us and then we assess whether they have grounds for making that application. So I'm not sure, you know,
So imagine a set of circumstances where a business is actually trading. They've not paid their business rates, and it gets to the end of the financial year. We might be aware that that business is trading. It gets to the end of the financial year, and we get the situation where we're being asked to write something off. It doesn't happen. Those sort of anecdotal cases don't happen frequently, but it might be a situation where you use the powers available to you. Does that not arise?
That wouldn't be true for that.
Yes, Guy.
Yeah, just to come back on that a little bit. So as a leadership team, again, we have talked about levels of debt and we are seeing debt creep up for the council as well. So actually, I think Laura's given the correct answer, which is that, you know, if it's a shop front, then we don't need to be covert about it. We can go into the shop front to see whether or not they're trading. But actually, we do need to think about levels of debt and whether or not some of these powers that we hold might become useful for us going forward as it continues to creep up. That's just my opinion as well, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. So we just discussed we just discussed non-domestic rates. What about council tax for residents? If those perhaps aren't paying and have some reason, do we have authority to investigate those to see whether they are eligible to pay those or not? Thank you.
I don't believe, I'd stand to be correct, we use any form of covert surveillance in that type of scenario. I think my suspicions are that it's through normal processes of maintaining a view on people's repayments, trying to proactively contact them if they're getting into arrears or not paying, and offer solutions. So that might be instalment plans, it may be delays in the payments in some form. It could equally be directing them towards any form of benefit or a support mechanism. So I think that's the proactive, supportive side of the process. We would use, I believe, collection agents, etc. And so there would be points where we would be doing that assessment of whether it's a can't pay rather than a won't pay type scenario. But I'm pretty sure that our processes don't involve any form of directed surveillance for that type of debt, basically.
Yes, Lauren.
Through you, Chair. That's loud. If we created a social media profile, for example, and we used that and it was anonymous, and we went and investigated any action that they have, that would be covert surveillance, and we would expect it to be engaged at that point. But we train people extensively on not to do that. So yeah, it would never be triggered through those circumstances. There's other processes.
Well done on that item. Thank you all very much indeed. Can I just comment, Mark, that I think it's excellent you pay the acknowledgement that you've talked to 3 other councils who've gone through similar thing, updating their things and taking legal advice. So it's right up to date. I think that's very good. The recommendations are, one, that this committee notes the RIPA monitoring report for the 2021-2022 financial year, and secondly, that this committee approves the updates to the corporate policy and procedure for RIPA as set out in Appendix 1. Are we all happy with those recommendations? That's unanimous. We'll move the next, please. Next item on the agenda is a verbal update on the audit findings report.
Sorry, Chair, just to interrupt, we've got exclusion of public and press before that, I believe. Oh, no, I apologise.
I'm quite capable of getting it wrong with it, not on this occasion. A verbal report on the audit findings report for this council 2021-22 with our external auditor Kirsty Lees of Grant Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. I better keep it clean then if we're in the public. Work is ongoing on the 21-22 financial statements. We've made good progress since the last committee. and a number of areas are close to being completed, which is really encouraging. Probably the most important area not yet finished is around journals. I think everyone knew this was going to be a bit trickier than usual, given the change in ledger partway through the year, and it has turned out to be quite tricky. We had engaged our specialist internal IT audit team as a matter of course because of the change partway through the year, and they've struggled to finalise and are yet to complete their work on understanding and evidencing the controls present in the new ledger. I think part of the delay is because the new ledger is provided by a third party, and there have been a few delays and miscommunications as information is relayed through the various parties involved in the audit work. We've also identified some specific events that we've had to dig into a bit further, and this has held up some of our audit work on journals that happens further down the line in the audit process. And we'll be reporting on the detailed findings as part of the audit findings report, and we'll explain the implications that that's had on the audit in that report. We understand that the finance team has struggled this year with recruitment and retention of staff, as extensively covered earlier, and that they've been really flexible in collating evidence and responding to our queries, so we wanted to express thanks for that. We've also had some staffing issues on our side. It included an unexpected sickness of a key member of staff for a few weeks, and we have managed to secure some additional resources to put into the audit over the next month or so to close down pieces of work. We're looking to complete all outstanding audit work within the next month, subject to receiving assurances from EY as auditor of the pension fund. In respect of the pension liability on the council's balance sheet. As you'll be aware, there is now a special audit and member standards committee on the 23rd of November, and we're aiming to issue an audit findings report for that meeting. And fingers crossed, Avatar will be signing the opinion very shortly after that, in time for the 30th of November deadline. In terms of the value for money work for 21-22, the Code of Audit Practice does require the auditor to issue the auditor's annual report by the 30th of September. But the National Audit Office, the NAO, they updated their guidance so that the auditor now has 3 months after the financial statements have been signed to issue that AAR. So Avatar has written to Councillor Spruce as chair of the Audit and Member Standards Committee, informing him of that. And has given an expected timeline of reporting no later than the end of January next year. I'm happy to take any questions that you have now, and also happy to take questions away for Avatar if you'd prefer.
Thank you for that update, Kirsty. Any questions? Yes, Councillor White.
Could you, as the chairman of the committee, because ultimately it's you that signs off the documents on this, just make sure the committee is informed of any potential blockages to progress, so that we can know that what we're expecting to see on the 23rd of November. And we would like to be standing behind you when you sign that thing off. Obviously, we'll come and watch as you get crucified in the market square, but yeah.
Yes, Councillor Grange.
Just very quick, when you mentioned the pension audit in Ernst & Young, have you got any views on whether that's going to be on time? Because in previous years, that has been the factor delay, yeah.
The last we heard was a letter from EY, and they were on track for the 30th of November, but we've not heard anything, although I am hoping Councillor White chimes in if he has any inside information.
The only thing I would ask is the phrase "the last we heard" is an unspecified date. Now, if the last you heard was February of this year, that's no good to us. If the last you heard was 2 weeks ago, then that's bob on, isn't it? When was the last you actually heard?
Currently going through emails.
So a long time ago then.
I have a lot of emails. It was the start of this month.
Okay, any more questions or words to Kirsty? You're staying very quiet, Anthony, so presumably from your side, you're reasonably happy the way things are going?
I am, other than it is a bit frustrating having sat in on a meeting between the auditors and the IT company, some of the comments and the issues that are there to be honest. And you know, I said my piece in that meeting that when we're all under pressure and we all need to work together, and there are things we can do to improve that situation, which are fairly simple things to do, to be honest. I'm hoping that some of those comments have been taken on board and will improve, not just for us, but for other authorities that will probably be going through this same exercise in the next year or so, who are moving on to the finance system that we're on.
Thank you. All done for that item? Thank you. The next item, number 7, is the work programme. Can I just remind you all, because I think you have got it in your diary, we've decided to split from the meeting scheduled for the 30th of November to have one a week early on the 23rd to concentrate just on the audit accounts for last year. So there are 2 meetings. The item there showing statement of accounts under the 30th of November is going to be the 23rd of November. And I appreciate an additional meeting, but I think it's worthwhile because if you look at that work programme, it would have been a very, very long meeting on the 30th. And I believe statement of accounts are big enough and important enough to have an item on its own. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. On the 23rd of November, the OBR report gets published, allegedly. And so by our meeting on the 30th of November, we may have experienced a little more. It's been a bit of turmoil in the markets this week. I think I would ask if it's possible with your permission, Mr. Chairman, that perhaps Anthony could give us his take on the lie of the land for the local government sector as a consequence of anything that arises as a result of the report on the 23rd, because he'll have had, it's only a verbal report, he'll have had a week to think about it, and we as councillors may have had a bit of time to reflect as well about the potential impact on the local authority. So put it out there as a suggestion for a discussion about the impact on this authority for anything that comes our way from the government on the 23rd of November.
So you're suggesting an additional item on the 30th of November?
I think,
agree with you.
I think it would be remiss of us just to sail past that meeting on the 30th and just go, no, nothing to see here. I think our electorate would expect us to be cognizant of that, and I think it would be our duty to actually at least hear from our 151 officer about the impacts. I'm being rather verbose at the moment, sorry.
Is a week long enough to give a sort of executive summary of it, Anthony?
I would do something. I mean, it could be at quite a macro level, to be honest, because I think it's unlikely it will go down to individual authority level, but I think it will probably give some idea of the direction of travel of the government on how it proposes to deal with some of the issues that are around, and maybe to stabilise and provide a bit of confidence to the market. So I'm happy to do that, and needs be I'll get on and close some others to feed into that.
Thank you. Can you make a note of that? Well, add it on.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you. I now have to legally and formally read out to you. It is resolved that as publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which would involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. The public, I don't think that's indeed.